with host Jennifer Graziano of Zion Memorial Chapel and Cox and Graziano Funeral Homes. Jennifer is here to discuss a sensitive subject we all need to talk and think about. Here now is Jennifer Graziano and Time to Talk.
Good afternoon, Westchester. It's 12 noon on Wednesday, and that means it's time to talk with me, Jen Graziano. I'm a licensed funeral director who oversees my family's funeral homes, Cox and Graziano of both Mamaroneck and Greenwich, and the Zion Memorial Chapel of Westchester. Every Wednesday, I come to you discussing important topics and sensitive matters that all of us need to pause and reflect upon at some point. And through this show, I hope to provide a platform to do so. If you are joining us this afternoon on 1460 WVOX, we'll take questions, comments, and calls to 914-636-0110. And howdy to my friend Gerald in the control room. How are you? And welcome Facebook Live viewers. Happy to have you joining this afternoon with thanks to my friend Tim Judge. So another friend of mine on the other side of the aisle here today, Joe Soricelli, Aging Issues Info. His specialty is housing, finance, and all things that require us to plan ahead for the time when we're seniors. Great tips, great insights, but a special focus today on the housing climate. As I was kind of ranting to Joe before the show began, specifically where our two funeral homes are located in Mamaroneck, the entire landscape of a community has changed in the shortest span of time. Joe, welcome, first of all.
Thank you.
I remember for 7 years I ran Harbor Fest, and for anyone listening who knew what Harbor Fest was, it was the most amazing day in Mamaroneck. 20,000 people would come to the village. We'd shut from the railroad down into the harbor. Street vendors, music, food, games. It was incredible. Everyone you know came out, and it was just great. So the last Harbor Fest, I guess I was pregnant then, would have been 8 years ago. In that time, the village has become unrecognizable to me. With the buildings and homes and structures that have been taken down and replaced with these monstrous residential apartments, leased apartments, it just changes the entire demographic of a community and landscape. Talk to us a bit about the effects when a community goes through that type of transformation.
Let's talk history.
Mm-hmm.
Before the show started, we talked about, we're a little bit of an old soul.
I know, I'm totally guilty of that.
No.
There's an 85-year-old trapped in here. I feel like an 85-year-old in my hip.
Not an 85-year-old trapped in here, but the way we were brought up.
Yeah.
All right. A lot of us somewhat pine for the way we were brought up, a community. When you went out, you didn't sit behind a computer. You knew your neighbors. Right? I can ask a person most of the time, when was the last time that you were together with your neighbor? What do your children do, if you have children, after school? They go to programs.
Mm-hmm.
They don't go out on the street.
No,
right?
They certainly do. There's every day of the week.
Everything is changing. And what has started to happen is people, the communities in and of themselves are adopting to this sort of a lifestyle. Now, there are two parts of this lifestyle, right? One is it's not permanent. When you bought a home, the goal was usually to pay off the home. Live in it for 20, 30 years. I own my home outright, whatever it may be. But you were there for a long period of time.
It was the American dream.
Correct.
To own that home outright, to purchase it, to pay off that mortgage. They used to have, I remember my mom telling stories about her aunts having mortgage burning parties. And, when you burn the paper and they own the house, you're right. You're absolutely right.
It was a different environment. Now, it's much more of a temporary housing situation.
Very true.
Right? So what has the community done? It's adapting to the market, whether it be a millennial, right, or someone else that I'm not certain if I'm going to be working. Or I can expand upon it. It's people used to work for companies for 30 years.
Right.
Now they work for companies for 3 to 4 years.
Absolutely.
Right. So why are you going to buy a house in a community that you may move, within 5 to 10 years.
But what happens then when the residents of the community are no longer vested in that community? You don't have a stake in the game. You don't have equity in that community. So, who you're electing in office and tax implications don't matter as much to you. You're paying rent. Or in it, the whole entire slate of a town board doesn't really matter much to you.
No, you have an
just,
agenda.
you come home.
There is an agenda, right?
So what happens? And even the schools itself, the resources and the infrastructure of a school, how do they absorb, again, where one house is now replaced by a building, or where one house is now a multifamily home, and all those kids are going to the same school? Who absorbs the impact of these changing communities? And what happens to the senior that is still residing in this newly changed community?
Unfortunately, it becomes overburdensome to the existing homeowners.
Gotcha.
Right? It's just a natural situation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, fortunately, a lot of the per se new structures have a fairly significant tax base, right? But can it replace, can the taxes that are drawn from let's use a 6-unit building compared to a 2-family house, right? Usually are not going to completely offset the impact on, as you said, the school system.
Right.
Now, the interesting part of the puzzle, though, is there are a lot less children coming into communities. We've become a transient, township, whether it be, my office is in New Rochelle on Harrison Street, right across from Social Security. Within 100 yards, there are 5 buildings going up. And then I also say there is one building that's been there for a while. There's 2 buildings actually that have a significant vacancy rate. So
it's true. And I heard something too the other day that millennials, or I read something, they don't even want cars. And whereas it was the dream to own that home and to have your children play with the backyard and the picket fence, that is of yesterday. Because if they have a child, arguably one, but they'll raise that child in that apartment structure and then walk to a playground or a park for recreation, or enroll the child in so many programs that, again, that playing in the street is a thing of the past. So whereas we look at it and kind of scratch our head and say, well, why would they want that? It has everything that they want. But on the flip side of that is the existing homeowner who, and where it's amazing to me, and I'm all, as much as I'm an old soul, I think change and progress are great things. But you're in a short 5-year span, you just look out the window at a different landscape. The flats of Mamaroneck, the industrial section, when you come off Fenimore Road, was always just that, the flats. There was some great multifamily homes, some first-generation Italians who lived there. It was a great community. And now I look, and there's like a wait list to get in these massive structures. I actually turned around one day. I couldn't believe what had gone on behind that Halftime Brewery. Mm-hmm. Used to be the Blood Brothers site. And there was this huge structure that came as if out of nowhere. And it's just amazing to me. And I know, Mamaroneck's in great proximity to New York City. It's a short train commute. All of these structures are within walking distance to Metro
parks,
North.
You have beaches.
You have Park, you have Harbor Island. Yeah, no, it's got everything. It's always felt like home to me. But I believe this has to be going on the county at large, not
it's
just...
on the county at large. And we have to also talk about the other phenomenon which is taking place. And it's part of me being on a zoning board. Every other building going up seems to be an assisted living facility.
Quite a bit of that going on.
What you now begin to see is you have the dynamics of 2 different populations that are trying to be served, but within the same geographic area. And what I mean by that is, as a senior starts to age through the stages of retirement, there comes a point where they don't want to maintain a house. They may not be able to maintain a house. and they will look
and
at
the ancillary responsibilities of the snow removal and those harsh
everything.
winters
That's
we
the
have,
maintain.
the landscaping, gardening.
Everything about it. And then what we also talked about is, unfortunately, an inordinate amount of the burden of the infrastructure is being shifted to the homeowners. So all of a sudden their taxes are getting higher as we go through it. So what you have is you have this senior community that is looking to move. They may go to an assisted living facility, which is, in simplest way put it, it's hotel style living.
Right, with transportation, shuttle service, access to, and some of them you can stay on and transition as your needs, transition to skilled.
Let's not even you have those as continuing care communities.
Right, but even the transportation, again, that's a big
Everything about
deal
it,
to them. Hotel living.
But when you look at where they're putting them,
Mm-hmm.
it's the same locations that we're putting at these other housing units, because they usually want to be walking distance to a train station.
Right. So we're serving, life beginning and life at the other side, and then there's the whole middle and in between.
The middle in between is unfortunately bearing the brunt, because usually that middle in between are the homeowners.
Right.
Because they may have multiple children. If you have one child, as we said, it's possible maybe to live within an apartment. You have 2 or 3 children. I'm sorry, I couldn't imagine it, right? Although I do know, I have to say this, I do have a client actually who bought a second 2-bedroom unit directly below him and put a circular staircase in New York City, because they're just never leaving the city.
Well, that's a different ball game altogether.
And it's also different, as everybody says, it's different financials. Because we were talking briefly, there are some proposals out there for some very large housing developments. One, personally, in my community, I thought was going to be a complete flop. I still don't understand how they sold the houses for what they sold them for in the particular area. But they were getting $1.2 million to $1.5 million in a $700,000, I'll say $500,000 to $700,000 neighborhood.
Just houses, or was it a
Just
community,
houses.
like townhouse, clubhouse?
No, this is it. These were just individual massive houses being built next to a cemetery and next to a corporate park. That the majority of the people who bought them were coming up from Brooklyn and saying, I can get this brand new house, right? It's not walking distance to anything. The best question that I actually got from somebody, just a pet, because I do walk through the area, but they said, oh, do you know where the nearest temple is? And I said, I honestly don't. I said, I just don't know. There are people purchasing things for ridiculous numbers. They like new. And then you have these, how can I say? You have an old house that is on a lot large enough to be broken up into 2 lots, and they become the little McMansions.
Right.
And the pricing.
But again, I think, well, you touched on something else. A part of what's driving the new wave of housing is that influx from the city.
Exactly.
And, coming from Brooklyn, coming up the west side of New York, and, Westchester is just the ideal spot. It's suburban living with urban proximity. And there's so many communities in Westchester that mimic that urban lifestyle now, where it's the apartment living, walk to town. I mean, again, Mamaroneck I keep going back to, but if you walk down Mamaroneck Avenue, everything you need is right there.
Exactly.
Restaurants, dining, gyms, schools, beautiful library, houses of worship. So you can certainly mimic the city urban lifestyle in a somewhat quieter suburban setting. And that seems to be what's sought after. Whereas when people came up to escape the urban lifestyle and they wanted grass and greenery and trees, not so much anymore. But again, it keeps begging the question, what happens to those who wish to age here? So does it become financially advantageous for them to sell the home and go into one of these new assisted communities that you speak of? Because those are not inexpensive. I mean, if you're paying for a concierge hotel lifestyle, when you do go to a 5-star hotel looking for that concierge, you pay for that trip. If that's what you want, that's great, but you go in knowing that. For seniors, are they kind of now going to be forced into that lifestyle, or kind of if it's not that, some substandard facility or a Section 8 situation?
All right. We've moved on the 2 extremes here. And I'm going to try to clarify or quantify that discussion. When a person goes into retirement, hopefully they have some sort of plan.
Right.
All right. And that plan can maybe consist of a pension, a stabilized income, and some sort of savings and Social Security. But everybody ends up with a budget. And the budget allows them to do certain things. Many times right now, because of the cost, as you said, the extensive cost of potentially an assisted living facility, or just a rental that they want to potentially move into, of a size they want to move into. Unfortunately, there seems to be, 2-bedroom apartments being built that have the bedrooms are 10 by 10. It looks like a dorm room. Literally, there's no storage, there's no anything else, so it becomes not it's not something a person's going to transition into. So you have these extremes where you end up with a budget, and then you end up with a decision. Now, if the budget allows you to stay within your household, and the household is safe, it may be the best alternative. We do have to consider what's going on within the real estate market all the time, but that's just being there. But a lot of times you are able to sustain, in your current residence. The problem, as we were discussing earlier, though, is because of these new alternative, buildings, we're starting to see strains on the infrastructure, right? Potentially, maybe schools, maybe the school system, maybe not. But we're seeing strains. So the only way that a municipality can pay for these, financial strains is raising taxes.
Right.
So now your house may not be as attractive, right, because of the increased taxes.
So when you're ready for the sale is not as easy as you would have hoped.
It's not easy. And that is why you have to start to plan through this. Now, the alternative, which you were talking about, is if I own my house outright, and I'm going to use very simple numbers right now, and I can sell my house for $500,000 net, hopefully more, just using a simple number. $500,000 net, right, at 5% interest, or 4% interest would generate $20,000 of income without touching the principal. When you look at that, that's $1,700 towards your living expenses, but you're no longer paying taxes. You may already be paying $30,000. So now all of a sudden, if you were paying $30,000 to maintain the house between taxes, maintenance, and so forth, add the simple numbers, add the $20,000, you're up to $50,000. Now all of a sudden, that $5,000 a month for the assisted living is the same budget.
Right.
So
it works out. Okay.
I'm not going to say it works out every time.
Well, no, but you offer an avenue where this is doable.
There's a decision, and fortunately, not going to say unfortunately, fortunately, everybody has to plan to live into their 90s, if not 100. That's the part that people don't necessarily. You have, you look at your business per se. I will say 10 years ago, I imagine the average age of a person that was dying was significantly younger.
It's always, I mean, I think now, you hit another issue, another epidemic, the opioid crisis somewhat skews that. So, yeah, I mean, listen, for the most part, your averages pretty much don't change as much, but it's up. But again, other facets of the business have changed that tie into everything you're talking about. Yeah. Why have a burial and tie someone to a parcel of land when people are transient and they don't want to be here? So therefore, cremation is on the rise. 10 years ago, the conversations I had with families in the arrangement office are far different than what I have today. A little head scratching, but it's a reflection of everything else going on in our day.
There is not an allegiance or an affinity to say, I'm going to be here.
Right.
So,
and people know their children won't be here. Very rare, seldom is the family where everyone stayed in close proximity. So yes, again, tying into my profession, a lot of it certainly does connect. But I know a big part of what you do is lecturing and community and planning ahead. And you give lectures. You have one coming up in the fall that are named Should I Stay or Should I Go? So I think everything you're outlining for us today, Joe, hopefully it resonates with listeners and viewers to start to think about, really, should I stay or should I go? Just that. And
That's the question.
and and I think there is a bit of nostalgia and sentimentality that comes in. Even for me, growing up, going to work with my dad, and now being there myself, when I look at Mamaroneck, it is a bit unrecognizable to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that might come into the decision making for some people as they're aging. They're looking around, and what was once so familiar is
not
unrecognizable. The people coming in to fill these buildings are not the children and grandchildren of friends and relatives. Again, it's all Manhattanites and Brooklynites. And
when, certain communities within Westchester County were multi-generational communities.
Mm-hmm.
They don't exist as much as they used to.
No, not at all.
All right. So when we answer the question of should I stay or should I go now,
Mm-hmm.
one of the very first questions that I ask a person is their social interactions. Because if I'm going to use this, as a 70-year-old still, has lots of friends in the community, is very social in the community, I sometimes ask the simple question, when was the last time your neighbor was in your kitchen for coffee? Right? We grew up that way, right? We grew up that neighbors were coming over.
My great-grandmother and my nana, they lived together in the West End of New Rochelle, and they had a front door and a screen door, so the front door would get open at 7 a.m., so everybody just came in and out of the screen door, and that door stayed open till 7 p.m.
Yeah.
And be it neighbors, relatives, there was a plugged-in percolator coffee pot, and I grew up that way. And
It was always a cup of coffee. There
Yeah.
was always whatever. It could
an
be.
Entenmann's cake, and Sebastian Maniscalco does a very good scene on that. But I think so
I do
many of
know.
us can, you know what I'm talking
I
about.
know.
Nowadays, when people have company, they hide under the table.
No,
but
you don't answer the door.
Everybody down. Yes, but you're absolutely right. So that's a great question to ask. If someone's aging, what is the level of social interaction?
Because
That's key.
And also for longevity, it's a big piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
But as you said, I don't recognize Mamaroneck anymore.
No.
Right? I used to get 10,000 people to show up for a block party. Now I get 10, and they're all my relatives. Right? It's a different aspect. And as you begin to not recognize your community and not know your neighbors, then there's that's a decision on where did they go. Right? It's very important for an individual when they're considering housing options to think about those next steps. And I have to say, these new communities, these temporary housing situations are designed also for transition. Because
Absolutely.
I can sell my house. I could stay in the community for a little longer, right? I can right size, as I often say. I'll put 5 rooms of furniture in storage, and I'll take 2 with me to get to the small unit. But I am eventually going to buy my house down in Florida
Right.
or whatever else.
And I like right size instead of downsize, because it's not downsize kind of bears a negative connotation, but you're right sizing to adjust to your needs at the present time and the needs that you're going to have. We're coming to a close. I want people to know where they can find you, because you are a really good resource, and aging issues are your specialty, and making your plans so it's, people can come to you in their 40s and 50s, when they're young, and they can still talk about a plan. So you can really run the gamut of your clients. But aging issues management, financial and life strategies. I should have the glasses on, but don't today. Aging issues management, folks. Really, you have to
One
read
of the
that
things
to
that
me.
actually
It's pretty bad.
one of the things that we do is we do try to manage the issues. I can be reached at 914-468-0186. My office is in New Rochelle. I do visits within, to people's homes when necessary. But it's a planning office. It is not a sales office. And we try to teach people how to plan for all the stages of retirement, because there isn't one.
Right.
Right? There's multiple stages. There's those years in the beginning that you are going to enjoy life, and maybe you're going to continue to work part-time.
Right.
And then somebody needs a little bit of help, so you start to slow down a little bit. And I got to say, that's the period of time that most people have to address housing, because those stairs look higher.
Right. It just becomes problematic, and it's just a functioning issue. And you also lecture. You're going to be doing a talk in Mamaroneck in October. Anything coming up more recently?
We just did one this past Saturday on June 1st. It was a senior law day. We'll likely do another meeting in September in New Rochelle, right? At Iona College, I do hold it there. And we'll present it. You can reach me, or find me at Aging Issues Management, or Aging Issues Info is another part of the program. It's more of a not-for-profit piece of it. But you can find me, and again, it's Joe Soricelli. Jen, thank you so much for the time.
Oh, Joe, happy to have you here again. We'll have you back, 914-468-0186. Thank you for the great information. And this is Jen Graziano thanking you for taking the time to listen as we took the time to talk. Have a great day, Westchester. Bye-bye.